Now, everything we've been talking about might work really well for kind of slow to medium tempos, but what do we do if we have to play really fast? You might notice that your bass drum feathering becomes really cumbersome after a certain tempo, or maybe your ride cymbal hand starts to become fatigued. And I left a little hint in the hi-hat lesson about how you might survive those extreme up tempos. But let's talk just a little bit about how to survive actually playing the ride cymbal. Now, I don't mean to reinvent the wheel because there are really great educators like John Riley who already have good lessons on YouTube about how to do this. I do want to talk a little bit about how we group these things together and the fact that it's not 3 individual strokes that I'm going to play. It's actually one coordinated motion. One way that people talk about this is what we call the drop catch. It looks something like this. Now remember, when we're playing fast, the swing is going to straighten out. So when you practice it slow, you can actually practice it in a straighter feel or timing. You don't have to swing it so much. But watch how the first stroke is going to be caused by my wrist or arm motion. Then the second one kind of happens for free through a little bit of pressure, and then I gather the stick or catch the stick at the end. And when I practice slow, I like to think about practicing in slow motion. So it's not just a slower tempo, but I imagine I'm playing it like the fast version, recorded it and slowed it down. That way all my motions become smooth and connected, and the timings and feeling of everything should remain the same. This is really important for when we're training our muscle memory, because if you can do it slow and smooth, you can do it fast. So back to dropping the stick and catching it, we want to think of that as one motion. It becomes one thought, and 3 notes happen. Kind of like how we might play paradiddles or something like that out of our rudiments. We group more information together because if it's all isolated events, that's way too much to think about. So just one thought in my mind. Now let's talk about that bass drum, because after a while it just becomes too much to feather it, right? So instead, I'm going to stop feathering entirely, and I'm only going to save it for conversational accents between the snare drum and the bass drum. If you're like me and coming from more of a rock and pop background, trying to learn jazz, then that's good news for you, because a lot of the language that you've learned for rock and pop actually works really well when you're playing up-tempo swing. You can take like a 16th note fill and then now just call that your 8th notes. And because it's a straight 16th fill, it's going to fit here. Now we want to kind of like think about the phrasing and make it fit a little bit better, but here's an example. You can take a very simple rock and roll type fill like this. And when you put it in a jazz context, it'll sound like you're playing jazz. So it's great news if you already have some comfortability with fill ideas like that, because all that language is going to be useful to you now in jazz. Here's some other ways that I might incorporate ideas for this uptempo. In fact, it's not really right to think about jazz and rock as separate things at all. Watch what happens if I apply kind of a halftime interpretation to an up-tempo swing feeling. So it's not an accident. These musics are actually completely connected through history, and the better you understand how our music on drum set evolved, the better you can kind of bring a really authentic roots approach to each of the styles you're playing that will even apply to the most contemporary styles that we have today. As always, I hope you got something out of these tips. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more lessons.